On the Sunday in the middle of the long weekend for Labor Day in 1977, the weather was pleasant and bright. My buddy and co-worker picked me up to take me to a barbecue that was being held at the home of another acquaintance. While we were making our way through a busy crossroads, a sports car ran the red light and crashed into the side of our vehicle at full speed. As we careened towards the curb, I recall hearing the sound of metal crunching and feeling a tremendous shock. After that, everything seemed to slow down, and I recall seeing the windshield shatter in slow motion as it happened. It appeared as though frost was accumulating on the glass. I gazed out the window of the passenger compartment and watched as the concrete light pole moved ever so little closer to the car. I knew there was no way I could survive this situation in any way, shape, or form. When that idea entered my head, everything came to a complete halt. There was no longer any sound or motion. Everything appeared to be floating in midair. I felt as if I were being encircled by a presence, and then I heard a swooshing sound, as if helicopter blades were very nearby. I found myself climbing the ranks quite rapidly all of a sudden. I had the sensation that someone or something was holding me, and I knew that everything was going to be all right. This embrace felt extremely kind. The sound became more intense as we accelerated our pace. White light was the only thing I could see, and despite its intensity, I had no trouble focusing on it. It was odd when I looked up and saw white, then looked down and saw the accident scene. I recall looking up and seeing white. I was overcome with an incredible sensation of tranquility and peace. I had no doubt that things would turn out well. We arrived at the beginning of a very long road that was paved with cobblestones. I was able to see a major metropolis to the left and a gorgeous field to the right as I traveled forward. A brook with a bubbling sound went alongside the walkway. I had never seen anything like it. The buildings glowed with iridescent hues that I had never seen before. The city was made entirely of luminous glass. In the field, I could hear children, adults, cats, dogs, birds, butterflies, and animals of every sort singing and playing. I saw children, adults, cats, dogs, birds, and butterflies. I desired to become one of them right now. After that, I was finally able to see my guide. He was somewhere between 30 and 35 years old and had a really striking appearance. When I saw him, he was draped in a brownish-beige robe, and I had an instant recognition for him. He flashed a grin before saying, "Come on, follow me." My guide took me into one of the structures. As we came closer, the skyscrapers towered higher and higher until they were obscured by the clouds and no longer visible. We walked inside a space that gave the appearance of being a library. It was constructed out of marble and dark wood, and it included numerous floors. Scrolls filled the whole view, from the very top to the very bottom. The most majority were rolled, although others were made of fabric, others of rough paper, and yet others were flat and engraved in marble. It was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen in my life. There were a lot of people there, and they were busy moving about. They each stared at me, and I had the impression that they were overjoyed to see me. Some even cheered. After that, I was taken to a room that had the appearance of a conservatory. As soon as I was left to my own devices, the walls began to move and speak to me. The projection of movies in complete 360 degrees at the same time. I witnessed the domino effect of what harsh and nasty words and deeds would do to individuals, how it would start with one person and spiral down to 300 people, and how it would start with one person and start with one person. I felt the frustration and misery that everyone else had. I had the distinct impression that I was going to blow. I was jolted to the very center of my being emotionally. During the entirety of my time there, that was the sole event of a neutral or bad nature that transpired. I was told to go back to the library since I was about to begin my study, which consisted of reading the scrolls. I spent 60 years of my life there reading and learning. The majority were accounts of whole lives, from birth to death. I was given permission to feel the feelings of the majority of people. Some were lively, while others were more sedate in nature. Information comprised a significant portion of what was downloaded. Trying to make sense of this is going to be challenging, but I'll do my best. We each have a part to play in the big picture. Even before we are born, we make the decision as to what kind of lives we will lead. Whether that decision is to live a good life or a bad life is irrelevant, because there is no such thing as a good or bad life. Rather, each life is simply a role that you have chosen to play in your evolution and development. That is why we are able to remember things. Due to the variations in our lifestyles, beliefs, opinions, etc., we are able to learn and develop. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but even the worst things, death, devastation, disease, are necessary. Think about it. If everything was always fantastic and going your way, if all relationships were good, and if everyone got what they wanted, life would eventually become somewhat monotonous and uninteresting. I'm sure that must be beautiful, but it wouldn't allow for much in the way of advancement, would it? Another concept that may be difficult for you to wrap your head around is the idea that there is no such thing as time. Your life is occurring in real time, which means that your past, present, and future are all contained within the same bubble. The so-called linear progression of time is an illusion created by the filter that is our brain. I know, it's just so odd. This might potentially bring into doubt the concept of free will. Is it in our possession? Both yes and no. Even if everything in your life is predestined, you still have no idea what the results will be. Always keep in mind that things might change at the drop of a hat. I was aware of everything there was to know about the cosmos. Nevertheless, why, how, and what does it all mean? Because I spent so much time there, it would have been impossible for me not to know everything. When I got back home, I realized that I had forgotten a lot of the material that I had been given. My assumption was that it was done on purpose. When I was told that I needed to go back, that moment is one that I will never forget. I was taken aback. I really didn't want to leave. I made my case. I didn't win. However, I did make a promise with myself that in the event that I did return, I would remain. On the other hand, I'm quite sure I've said that before, apparently quite a few times. Consequently, I needed to cram my vast interior back into that little body, which by that point had already begun to lay partially outside the broken automobile. I was not able to blend in very well. It took me a full year to get into my new routine. It was in the ambulance that I came to. According to the EMT, he was relieved to see me. My friend who was driving was injured in the accident and spent 3 months in the hospital with shattered bones in his pelvis, arm, and femur, as well as crushed foot. I didn't sustain any injuries in the process. The insurance adjuster couldn't believe I made it out of there alive, much less without sustaining any injuries. Imagine it happening. You see, the passage of time is completely unimportant. 60 years in paradise would only be equivalent to 30 minutes on Earth. My experience can basically be summed up like this. There were many additional events that took place there, but this is already too long. LOL. Note, after over 40 years, I'm now getting around to writing this because of a strange string of occurrences that's been happening to me recently. The most important one was that I found out who exactly was acting as my guide. During the entirety of my stay, he was right there by me. After I retired, I moved back to my childhood home in a tiny town, and one day as I was out and about, I happened to pass by a church. I looked in that direction, and suddenly it struck me that my guide had been a buddy and fellow student who had passed away when he was just 12 years old. It was definitely him, not even a shadow of a doubt in my mind. I knew him.